The morning was unusually quiet in the small rural town of Maple Grove. Snow clung to the roofs like frosting, and the early December chill bit at the cheeks of anyone daring enough to venture outside. But for Sarah Walker, the town's only full-time animal rescue worker, days like this weren't a reason to slow down. She had found the dog 3 weeks earlier, limping, ribs visible, eyes clouded with fear and fatigue. The golden retriever mix had been abandoned near the railroad tracks, and judging by her swelling belly, she was far along in her pregnancy. "I'm going to call you Grace," Sarah whispered the first night as she wrapped the trembling dog in a thick wool blanket by the fire. "We're safe now." Grace had responded with a faint wag of her tail. In the days that followed, Grace settled in, growing more comfortable with each passing moment. She followed Sarah around the rescue center, her eyes never straying far. Though she was clearly pregnant, something about her demeanor seemed off. She didn't nest the way other pregnant dogs did, and she was too quiet, too calm. By the time Sarah brought Grace in for her final pre-birth checkup at the local vet, even the experienced Dr. Rourke raised an eyebrow during the ultrasound. "She's full term," he murmured, squinting at the monitor. But this doesn't look like a typical litter. 2 nights later, Grace began to whimper. Sarah stayed by her side, stroking her fur, whispering words of encouragement. Hours passed. Then, finally, the first pup arrived. But it wasn't a pup at all. What on earth? Sarah gasped, holding the small, squirming creature. It was pink-skinned, hairless, and not canine. By the time the third one was born, Sarah was already on the phone with Dr. Rourke, who arrived in less than 20 minutes. He stared in disbelief at the tiny, wriggling newborns. "Sarah, these aren't dogs, they're foxes." "Foxes?" She echoed, heart racing. As it turned out, Grace wasn't just a pregnant dog. She had been a surrogate. Incredibly, Dr. Rourke explained that it wasn't unheard of. Under extraordinary circumstances, a dog could carry embryos of another species, particularly if the fertilized embryos were introduced medically. But there had been no lab, no experiment here. The pieces slowly fell into place. Grace had likely lost her own litter. Somewhere in the wild, a vixen, a female fox, may have died, leaving her embryos unguarded. Nature, in all its strange compassion, allowed the dog's motherly instincts and biology to take over. "Yeah, she must have come across the den," Dr. Rourke said softly. And something in her just took over. Sarah stared at the small creatures, now nuzzling blindly against Grace. And Grace, for her part, looked at them with nothing but love. Word spread quickly. Some locals gossiped. Others dismissed it as a hoax. But a small group, people who'd always believed in the unseen kindness of animals, rallied to help. Donations poured into the shelter. Blankets, formula, heating lamps. But it wasn't just physical help Sarah received. There was Thomas, the gruff old farmer from the edge of town who'd never said more than 5 words to Sarah before, dropping off a hand-built wooden crate lined with straw and wool. There was Maria, the school teacher, bringing her students every week to learn about wildlife compassion and the strange beauty of motherhood. And most touching of all, there was a quiet visit from Emily Caldwell, a young mother who had lost her baby the previous spring. She knelt by Grace and whispered, "I didn't think I could feel again, but this gives me hope." 3 months later, Grace and her foxlets were thriving. They'd grown soft fur, their pointed ears perked with curiosity. Hacha. They played, tumbled, and followed Grace everywhere as if she were their birth mother. One afternoon, Sarah stood by the enclosure, watching Grace gently nudge a tiny fox back into the warm den. A single tear rolled down her cheek. How strange and beautiful life could be. Grace, who had been thrown away like nothing, had chosen to give everything. Sarah turned as she heard the creak of the gate. It was Emily again, her face softer, brighter this time. She held out a hand, and Grace came forward, licking her palm. "Allah finds a way, doesn't it?" Emily said. Sarah nodded, even when it makes no sense. Eventually, the foxes were rewilded through a special program, released into a protected reserve where they could live safely. Grace watched as they were taken away, whining softly, but somehow understanding. Sarah adopted Grace officially that night. She didn't need a litter to be a mother. She didn't need papers to be loved. She just needed someone to believe in her. And as Sarah and Grace sat together on the porch, snow beginning to fall once more, the dog laid her head on Sarah's lap, content, warm, and finally home. In the end, kindness isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks on four legs, carries a broken heart, and still finds the strength to love again. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to change the world.